This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Steadman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Good, good. You know, for today, I thought I'd talk about a question that's come to me a couple ways. You know, one of the things that I want to point out first is that there's a lot of ways to get in contact with us, right? We have the voicemail feature on our website, idacpodcast.com. We have listener questions. And then, of course, we're both very reachable on LinkedIn in terms of sending DMs or whatever. But I've been getting the question, get this, remember we had Ryan Galuzzo on from NIST a few weeks back, and he talked about 800-63 and everything that's going on with that. I had the same question twice, which was, does this only apply to humans, or can I also apply 800-63 to service accounts? Well, I guess the question of whether or not you can do whatever you want to do, right? But I actually forwarded this question on to Ryan because he's the expert, and he got back to me saying that 63 does not cover service accounts. It only covers identity and authentication leveraged by human users. Then he goes on to explain that essentially the psychology behind 63 is that they wanted to get away from some of the draconian controls, I'll call them. He didn't call them that. I call them that because what you're trying to achieve is avoiding the human psychology behavior of, oh, this is hard to do, so I'm going to come up with an easy password. Well, when you're dealing with service accounts, you're not dealing with that psychology issue. So do with that what you want, but 63 was not meant for non-human users.
Okay. Well, that's good information. Kind of share it there. I guess people can take that and do whatever they want with it for sure. I guess, a lot of organizations, they look at the NIST guidelines and it's like gospel. It's like the letter of the law. And I think it sounds like they're more moving to theory and intention rather than true, like you said, draconian, thou shalt must do this like this. As long as I think you're doing the right thing from a security standpoint and definitely from an identity standpoint, that's probably more important than some arbitrary, if this, then that type of statement.
Yeah. I mean, look, having like black and white guidelines sure makes things easier. Unfortunately, in the identity space, there's not very many black and white guidelines.
Only the Sith deal in absolutes, Jim. Only the Sith deal in absolutes.
That's right. And, on the ID Pro Slack channel, Ian Glazer put out a question or a topic. He's like, this is going to get things going. And it was about moving from least privilege to zero standing privilege. And I looked at it like I caught up with the thread a few days after he posted, and there were already over 60 comments. And it was like, it really got people thinking. And again, there's not one right answer.
Mm-hmm. Well, shout out to Jim Morton, too. We had him on from Britiv way back when. And that's, I think, when I first kind of started to think about the zero standing privileges as he brought it up. That was like in the hundreds. For percent, we're like 260. I think this will end up being 266. So it's been a while, but I like the idea. I'm still a fan of zero standing privileges. I think it's great. I really kind of classified under some sort of attribute-based access control and having a dynamic switch based on whatever attribute says that you need this privilege this second, and then removing it when you no longer need that privilege. But I still think it's a very long, hard goal to get to for organizations if they don't have technology. Because I think the key part of zero standing privileges is automation.
I think the zero standing privileges idea makes a ton of sense. But I don't think it means that you don't use least privilege. I don't think they're exclusionary, right?
Yeah.
You show zero standing privileges, and then when you get those privileges just in time that you need them, they should only be the amount that you need to get the job done. And so it's like, you need both. And then the other thing is, I don't think zero standing privileges ever gets you to the point where it's like, all of your 10,000 accounts or whatever you have, none of them have any privileges on them, right? You need to have some point where it's like, okay, that's just not important enough to use zero standing privileges, because there is administrative overhead to it. The good thing about talking about this in a podcast form is that we get to go back and forth and nobody gets to come in real time and argue with us. So anyway.
Well, I welcome it. Argue, bring it back. Like if there's something we say that's you don't agree with, let us know on LinkedIn. We're happy to have a discussion. I think that's the great thing about opinions is they can change over time, right? It's okay to get smarter. Here's what I think right now. I'm like that meme or that that image. Feel free to change my mind. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, definitely true. So I really wanted to spend this weekend productively. Instead, I went down a YouTube rabbit hole on Las Vegas buffets because I was like, okay, I'm gonna have a free day there. I want to go to a buffet. Normally, I go to the Bacchanal, which is at Caesars, right? But I've been there so many times. I'm like, okay, well, I wouldn't mind reliving that experience, but I wonder what else is out there. What do the insiders really want? And so I just watched a ton of videos. And I'm not going to the Bacchanal, by the way. I'm going to the Wynn, which is, a lot of people say that's like the number one buffet on the Strip.
That's way north, too. That's, you're going to have to, that's either a long walk or you're going to hop in an Uber or Lyft or something.
Yeah, but I also got tickets for the Sphere. So the Wynn and the Sphere are right next to each other. So it's going to be the Sphere experience, which what I didn't realize when I booked it is like $80 for not that great of seats. It's off to the end.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only a 15-minute show.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah. Like the postcard from Earth is only a 15-minute show. Again, that was in my rabbit hole of Vegas things to do and buffets, etc. I watched a few videos of like what that experience was like.
So you watch videos about food, and then you watch videos about watching other videos in a giant sphere.
Yeah, it was an exciting weekend, man. Really exciting weekend. But I am looking forward to Vegas. We are going to Vegas at the end of May.
Yeah, we're going to be there for Identiverse. So looking forward to that. Identiverse, if you haven't heard, May 28th to the 31st. It's at the Aria Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. We've got a discount code for our listeners and anyone else who wants to use it. That code is IDV24-IDAC25. Don't worry, we'll have a link in our show notes. You can just click on it, and it'll give you 25% off of your registration. It does stack with early birds, so I think there's still early bird discounts going on right now. Feel free to use and abuse it. It's a good way to show support for the show. But looking forward to that. Cool thing, too, is you get 20 CPEs by showing up, which is awesome. You and I have to worry about CPEs for the firm that we work for, so it's always good, right? You get kind of credit for being there. Things like that. So if that's interesting to you, definitely check it out. But yeah, Identiverse. And again, we'll have a link in our show notes. And then the other conference that we're going to be at is Identity Week. We'll be at the Identity Week America. There's also Europe in Amsterdam, which is June 11th to the 12th. The America one's in Washington, D.C., September 11th and 12th. That's where you and I will be, Jim. And then Asia and Singapore, that's October 22nd, 23rd. Yet another discount code. So thanks to the organizers for helping us out with that. That one is easier to remember. IDAC30. You get 30% off. Again, we'll have a link in our show note for that one as well for people to check out. But looking forward to both those conferences. I know that we're going back and forth with each, trying to figure out, what kind of presence we'll have and where. But we'll be doing our thing regardless. Podcasty things, as I like to say, recording episodes and stuff like that. And looking forward to seeing familiar and new faces who have discovered us within the last year since we've been there. So looking forward to that for sure. Anything that I missed there, Jim?
No, I think, the only thing that you mentioned, like we're still trying to iron out plans, but we'll be there and we'll have opportunities for people to engage and, view a podcast in like real life or maybe even much more than that.
What's more than real life?
Well, we might be on stage. Like we were on stage at a few conferences last year, right? So
yeah,
that's the full on experience.
Yeah, and we're
I'm talking like a Las Vegas thing. It's the full on experience.
We at the Sphere, so we need Identity at the Center at the Sphere, and there you go. So
Identity at the Sphere.
I
don't think we get $80 for the tickets.
Yeah, we have to pay people to show up for that one. That's for sure. No, it's exciting. It's good times. We'll figure something out. We'll be at those conferences. We'll be at Authenticate later this year as well. So those are things a lot of fun. A lot of touch points of people and be able to kind of meet and talk and just hang out and have a good time in a good casual conferencey way. That sort of thing.
No, it's my favorite part of work is like getting out there and going to conferences and and meeting people and socializing. And like I said, I've got a new jacket. I'm going to display it for the first time at Identiverse. And, a lot of times I wear these jackets a few times and I have to retire them because I feel like, I already did that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So you're definitely the flashier dresser. I tend to fly a little bit under the radar, look kind of normal in quotation marks. We're going to have a conversation today about wallets. And I was thinking about like what we would call this show. And I was thinking it was like kind of the old riff on, what's in your wallet. But we actually have an episode already called that, like way back in the day. We talked a little bit about that a long time ago. I think it was like episode 2 or 3 or something like that. So we're going to talk about wallets, more of the digital identity wallet type of thing is what I'm thinking. So digital wallets, smart wallets, roaming wallets. Very happy to announce that we have on our show today, Nick Mothershaw. He's the Chief Identity Strategist at Open Identity Exchange. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hello. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Jim. Thank you for inviting me on today. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And you're joining us from, I'm imagining the UK, it sounds like, from that accent and from the time zones that we're dealing with. Where in the UK are you? And am I correct, or are you traveling at the moment?
You are correct. I'm in the UK. I live in the UK. I'm in a place called Derbyshire, which is in the middle of the UK. It's mostly a national park. It's a beautiful place to live.
That sounds awesome. I was there last year. We watched the Chicago Cubs play the St. Louis Cardinals at London Stadium. Got to partake of the city. First time I've actually been in London, and it was awesome. I loved it. I will go back in a second. But we're not here to talk about London and UK. We're here to talk about identity. And one of the things that we like to do is when we have someone on the show for the first time is really kind of understand what their identity origin story is. So I'll ask you this, Nick, how did you get into the world of identity? Is it something that you chose, or did it choose you?
I guess it chose me. I in the late 90s, I find myself working with law enforcement. And what I was doing was what we'd now call identity resolution and identity graphs. So we were looking across intelligence reports, crime reports, trying to make links, not just around the ID element, but around location. So we were doing a lot of smart routines to try and make connections for the police to help them solve crime. So that's where I started. And as part of that journey as well, I came across biometrics. So we were using biometrics way back in 2000. We were using them to monitor football crowds, to look for hooligans in the Netherlands during Euro 2000. So that was always law enforcement. I moved from there to look more, narrowed my focus to look at fraud. So I did a lot of work on fraud detection, fraud prevention. So they did the Hunter 2 system from Experian that's used all around the globe to detect fraud. That was one of my creations. Apologize to anyone who's still using it. It's nearly 20 years ago now, but it's still out there. And from there, moved into identity. So, fraud and identity, two sides of the same coin, really. So, to mitigate fraud, we started looking at positively identifying the individual rather than looking for the anomalies that indicated fraud. And then you put the two things together, you've got a much more robust set of fraud control. So that's how I ended up in identity. And by the kind of late 2010s, 2015, 16, I started to get involved with the Open Identity Exchange. I was running and operating the UK's only interoperable digital identity ecosystem, where you could use the ID to log into government and to private sector as well. And around 2020, kind of left my corporate existence and moved into work for the Open Identity Exchange for most of my time to help drive forward this cause of digital identity.
I got to tell you, that's a great backstory. I guess I'm not for people who aren't as familiar with Open Identity Exchange, and we might refer to it as OIX, throughout the show here. You kind of talked about the interoperability, but can you just tell us a little bit more about what the Open Identity Exchange is? What's the purpose? Who are members? Is it firms? Is it technology kind of side of things? Is it normal people in quotation marks? Tell me a little bit about the organization.
Yeah, we're a members organization. We're a not-for-profit. Our vision is that we can all have an identity, and importantly, a reusable identity. Reusable digital ID is what we focus on. And that we can use that anywhere around the globe, so that I can have an identity as I travel around that is trusted, it is interoperable all over the world. And that's our lofty vision. That's a vision we set out around 5 years ago. And we're making good progress towards achieving that. It's a bit like when Microsoft said a computer in every home was their vision. They was like, no, you're never going to achieve that. We know we're going to achieve ours, but it's going to take a little time. But we're making good progress on that. So, who are the members? And so we have Microsoft are a big member, Visa, Mastercard, people like Nexus, Barclays Bank. So they are corporations who have a stakeholding in the evolution of identity. We have a lot of identity component suppliers who are supplying authentication services or proofing services, some digital identity providers who are now starting to emerge in the market. So we've got around 70 members, all of whom are subscribing to that vision of creating reusable digital identities and ultimately that can be used all around the globe.
Nick, I think one of the biggest challenges that we face as technologists is explaining to non-technology people like our parents or other folks who are not in the industry what we do, right? And I think the idea of digital wallets or wallets, you got kind of, everybody knows what a wallet is in the traditional world. So do you ever wind up comparing and contrasting the two of those?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's very difficult to explain, what's the concept of a digital identity? It's hardly the most scintillating subject for most people. I mean, nobody woke up this morning anywhere in the world and thought, hey, I'm going to go get me a digital identity today. That's not what people do. Using the wallet analogy helps explain what we're trying to achieve to not just to end users, but also to corporations as well. And what we're trying to do is enable people to digitally prove who they are and what they're eligible to do. So it's not just about the identity proof, but it's about, can they be employed? Can they get on this plane? So the wallet analogy is a good way for people to understand that. It might just be an analogy as we move forward. We're using the word wallet today. It works well. The end users can get their head around that. It's got a good analogy to what they're doing in the real world. So for now, it's a great way to explain what we're doing.
Yeah, I kind of think it's funny. Like, you still see the image of a floppy disk. That means you want to save a document, but a lot of people have grown up in a world where they never use floppy disks. So the idea of like the term wallet, at some point, maybe some folks will never have had a wallet. Very possible. Because I think most people, if you interview them, would you rather leave the house without your wallet or without your phone? They probably would choose the wallet. They'd probably rather have the phone.
Yeah. Most young people don't have a wallet. So I've got 3 kids in their 20s. None of them would leave home with a wallet. They have their phone, and on their phone they've got their payment device, and that, as long as they've got that, they're fine. They don't carry anything else. They don't think feel they need to carry anything else. So I think you're right. In 20 years' time, we'll have a whole generation of people who are my age who have never actually carried a wallet.
Yeah. And the whole idea around credentials and the wallet, I mean, those are 2 different concepts as well. Can you kind of explain the difference between those 2?
Yeah, sure. And let's use the real world example of the wallet that's in our pockets or purses. So inside there, we have payment cards, we have driving licenses, we have loyalty cards, we have some tickets. Those are the credentials, and they sit inside the wallet. The credential proves something about me. With a payment credential, it proves I hold this account and I have the ability to initiate a payment from it. With a driving license, it's really there to prove that I am able to drive, and these are my driving capabilities. With a passport, it's I have the capability to travel that my government has granted me through issuing me that passport. And if we think of other credentials that aren't usually our physical wallets today, but are somewhere in our homes, we've got education certificates, we've got records of employment. All of these can be digital credentials as well. So it's not just constrained to what's in the wallets we carry around. It's the credentials that explain who we are and what we can do.
Yeah, so kind of in this traditional world, we have these wallets that by themselves don't have any functionality. They don't have any features, right? They just hold the credentials. And I think we're going to talk about that upcoming. But I think one of the things when you talk about, well, maybe we just hit on that point. So the wallets in the real world don't have any features or functionality, right? They just are used to hold the credentials. does that analogy carry over? Is a digital wallet essentially the same kind of thing, just holding your credentials?
I think right now it is. So if you think of the Apple Wallet on my phone, other wallets are available, that, when I put credentials in there, it's very analogous to the real world putting a credential in my wallet. It lets me store it, so I can put it in the wallet, and it lets me present it. I can take it out of the wallet and show it to someone. So it's a storage device that enables me to present. It's not actually great at presenting things. If you've ever tried to do it, it's you either have to generate a QR code, or you can do it through NFC. So the presentation needs a little work. But yes, essentially a way to store the credentials as we do today. We think that basic wallet model definitely needs to evolve if these things are going to be useful to end users going forward.
Yeah, and you guys wrote a paper recently, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes, talking about wallets and whether or not governments should be responsible for issuing wallets. I mean, like today, your phone has a wallet built in. I mean, I have a wallet on my Apple iPhone, and it's mostly holding things like my Panera customer loyalty number, like 100 ticket stubs from, Delta flights and things like that. So I don't care who issues a wallet. I pretty much just think of it as a feature of my phone. But you guys wrote a paper about this, right? Should governments issue wallets? And what was the conclusion you drew?
Yeah, we did. And my Apple Wallet's very much the same as yours. It's got it's got a payment card in it, a couple of payment cards. It's for the rail tickets for me because I travel on the train a lot here in the UK. It's got a few flight boarding cards. So, I'm using them today to collect this information. And that wallet is coming from Apple. The wallet in my pocket today comes from a craft shop, here in the Peak District where I live in Derbyshire. And I use that to store my wallets. It's interesting. It has some security features. So it says you're not supposed to be able to read my NFC chips through the side of the wallet. So even our physical wallets have started to get digital security features built into them today. We were looking at who's going to deliver wallets, and one of the things we'll come on to talk about is we also talk about smart wallets. So the wallet, this basic wallet, we see today needs to evolve. We see governments like the EU embarking on the UD Wallet program. That's a hugely ambitious program which demands each member state deliver to its citizens, either directly or through private sector partners, a UD wallet that can be used to present the core identity information that they're calling the PID at the heart of that, and then other information to open bank accounts, to access healthcare services, to access government services all across Europe. So it's a brilliantly ambitious program, but it involves the governments delivering wallets, and it involves the EU specifying heavily what those wallets should look like. So we started to explore this and contrasting that to the real world analogy today, and that the government doesn't deliver the wallet that's in my pocket today. It's something that I personally go out and source. There are lots of different designs, lots of different features, and that enables users to have choice, and it's independent from the government. And what our paper explored was the pros and cons of government issuing wallets themselves. Wallets are pieces of technology, and as they can become smart, they're going to become more and more complicated. Governments are not great deliverers of technology. They don't have a great history in terms of delivering IT projects, internally, let alone directly to their citizens for something as critical as a wallet. So it's not in their core competence to do it. They won't evolve. So if they say, what we fear with the EU is they'll set out a kind of minimum set of requirements, and that's all that will be delivered. And then it'll be a fairly grey wallet. It won't evolve. It won't be innovative. Private sector is a much better place to deliver the wallets. And also private sector then provides a level of independence from the government in terms of me having choice of where I store my credentials, and also some confidence that the government isn't watching what I'm doing. So if you imagine if the US federal government issued me a wallet and it sits on my phone and all my credentials are in it, And every time I prove who I am, how old I am, share any credential, that's done from my government wallet. People are going to think the government's monitoring everything they're doing. As much as government will say, no, we're not doing that. No, people will have that privacy fear as well. So that was another reason that we concluded that governments are not placed to deliver wallets themselves. So it's not a really long paper. I think you'll provide a link to it, in the associated information with this podcast. But our conclusion was that governments, they can issue wallets. Many of them will issue wallets, but they're not best placed to do so. Private sector will be more innovative. It will provide better privacy concepts to the end user, and will be more innovative in the long term.
Yeah, I think the first part of your argument was about the ability to deliver, which I can see that point for sure. My concern is I think that the privacy concerns could exist, whether it's government or a private organization doing it on behalf of the government, especially if there's not a competitive landscape where, essentially the government could just force the private company to turn over its records.
Yeah, so this is where trust frameworks come in. So a lot of the work we do at OAX is around the trust framework that makes identity be able to be trusted by relying parties and by users. So part of that framework is the privacy rules that sit around it. And if we look to the framework, we publish on our website a guide to frameworks. We've been doing an analysis of frameworks all over the globe. And what we want to see in frameworks from a privacy perspective is that the user is in control. We've heard a lot about self-sovereign IDs, which where the user is in control. That term self-sovereign is not very popular in most of the world. It implies too much user control. We are sovereign citizens of nations, and are afforded a lot of rights and benefits as a result. But what government should be doing is giving users control of their data. GDPR in Europe supports this. The frameworks that have been written around the globe, the one in the UK in particular, is putting in place user control and user agreement and user tracing of everything that happens. So the user can clearly see what data they have, where it's gone, and they can choose to change provider if they wish. Portability is a key element to this. Now, your point though, can the government enact other laws to go and pull the data from corporations? In many parts of the world, yes, they can. That's a separate layer really that sits above what we're doing in identity. It's a law enforcement feature that countries have put in place to protect themselves and their citizens.
Yeah, it's a very complex issue, right? So Nick, you previously talked about smart wallets, and so smart wallet contrasts itself. Obviously, I know that there would be a wide difference between a smart wallet and a leather wallet, which you and I have in our pockets. But in terms of digital wallets and smart wallets, what's the differentiation factor?
Yeah, so the wallets we're seeing today are not smart. So the wallet I have on my phone lets me store credentials. It lets me present credentials usually in a fairly clumsy way. If we consider some simple, what sound like simple use cases, we can expound the need for a smart wallet. So MDLs are starting to appear in wallets around the US, mobile driving licenses. Two major use cases for that, I guess. One is, it's a mobile version of your wallet for law enforcement to read. The other one is, can I prove I'm over 21 to buy liquor? That question of over 21 in the current mobile driving license implementation uses a data minimization principle, so that it will only present the fact that you're over 21, doesn't present any other information about you, or at least no more than is needed for that particular transaction. So we can go from a credential and minimize some of the information from it. But if we consider these rules are going to get somewhat more complicated, let's say I have not just MDLs in circulation, but I have digital travel credential, passports, I have other forms of identity, I have bank identity credentials that have come out of my bank, associated with my bank account. So all of those things could be used to prove that I'm over 21, because all of those providers know I'm over 21 and have checked I'm over 21. So the rules for the request to the wallet start to become not, I want a driving license. It starts to become, I want to know you're over 21. The wallet then needs to know how to interpret those rules and know that, well, actually, that could come from any of these 4 credentials, but they have to have been issued within, say, the last 3 months. They have to be bound to the user with the right kind of authenticators. So, for face-to-face liquor sales, in order to stop me giving my device to someone else with my MDL on it, one of the rules, and this is the rule that's being put in place in the UK, is that you must use a biometric authenticator there and then. Part of the theatre of the presentation is looking at the phone, generating the proof, and then showing that to the person who's reading it. And that only lasts for seconds, so you can't pass your phone from one person to another. So all of these rules then, for something that sounds like a very simple question, are you over 21, starts to become complicated. If you consider the rules then for travel, the rules for, we used to use COVID quite a bit. How do you prove you're COVID safe as opposed to you have a vaccine or you have a certificate? So the need for a wallet to be able to take these rules, interpret them on behalf of the user, and then return what is being asked by the relying party is critical. And that's why and where they need to become smart.
So it seems like the credentials could have dozens, maybe more attributes about you. It's the wallet then that would have the responsibility for which of those attributes to make available and which ones to keep private.
No, it's the rules. And so this is wrapped around the wallet. There needs to be a rule ecosystem. And again, this is where the trust framework comes in. So the rules for asking for over 21 and stating that when you ask for over 21, all you get back is an over 21 statement, but it's backed up by a biometric authenticator, need to be defined. And then the wallet needs to behave in accordance with those rules. But we can't allow wallet providers to define those rules. For a start, if there's multiple providers in the ecosystem, it will be inconsistent. So a lot of what we do is looking at standardization of these approaches for interoperability, but also it's setting the rules for good practice.
I'm glad you mentioned the word standardization, because I could see us going down this rabbit hole again of, blue text versus green text, Android versus iPhone, and this whole ecosystem play where right now people may be stuck in one ecosystem or another, and there isn't a lot of transportability for some of these things. I have Apple Wallet, right? Has my, boarding passes and credit cards and things like that. But if I want to move things to a different wallet, I have to set it all up again, and things don't talk to each other. I think that's, to me, one of the most critical things to solve for is that interoperability, which is why I'm glad things like standards are being developed around that to try and solve for that. Because what I could quickly see is, well, who has the best rule set around their wallet? Do the rules themselves need to be abstracted away from the actual wallet container that these things might exist? Otherwise, you end up in a scenario like, okay, well, here's the best wallet because it has the rules that I like. Well, how is that wallet going to talk to another wallet, or maybe even another reader, or things like that? So I'm concerned, but I'm happy to hear that it's at least being considered how this is going to work together.
And what you just on there, Jeff, is precisely what we're looking at in one of our working groups at the moment. So we were starting to explore whether there's actually 2 layers here, whether there is the more storage wallet element, which could be my Apple or Google Wallet, and this is where I keep my credentials. And you're right, credential portability is then really important. I can easily move them from one storage wallet to another. But then we're starting to separate out this. Is the smart element of this actually done by some kind of agent? Because these rules are going to be very complicated. They're going to vary by country. They're going to vary by sector, by country. So it's actually this specialist agent role in terms of interpreting the rules, working out what the user has in their wallet, working out what's missing, helping the user get that, and helping them to bring all that information together to satisfy the requirements for a particular transaction. We're starting to think of it, is that actually such a smart agent alongside the wallet? And the two things could come together into a smart wallet, but that's precisely the kind of work OAX does and is doing. We'll be publishing on that in May in time for some of the conferences you talked about earlier in the program.
Yeah, one of the things that comes to my mind is there's certainly that use case, like kind of the simple common use case of are you 21? But then there seems to be all these different use cases where you have to present a credential like your driver's license. So a scenario might be, I want to go buy a car. And I do that once in a blue moon, but I have to present my driver's license and they pull certain information off of it. So is there just that blanket scenario where everything becomes available, or so is the rule set by the use case? I'm trying to understand the rule set and how it applies and how we would deal with these infrequent use cases that probably not everything is designed around.
Yes, the rules are set per use case. So, to buy a car, I need to prove things about who I am, my ability to drive that kind of car, for instance. Then that's the only information that's needed. If any convictions or endorsements I've got, they're probably irrelevant when I buy a car. They're about my ability to drive. So each use case needs to be able to have a set of rules written, and the wallet needs to be able to interpret those rules. So one of the things we've been doing is we've analyzed 8 trust frameworks around the globe. We've found that they have a common DNA. We call this the DNA of digital identity. They all do things in the same way, but with different values, because frankly, countries who write frameworks have different values. They have different views on privacy, different views on technology. But we found they all do it in the same way. And we're now working on something called the Open Criteria Exchange tool that would enable a set of rules, policy rules and technical rules to be expressed by a relying party to a wallet for the wallet to then interpret. So we think this can all be a machine readable format that in future the wallet will be able to interpret as it goes from place to place.
So in addition to smart wallets, you also talk about a concept of roaming wallets. What's the difference? Now we go from regular digital wallets to smart wallets to roaming wallets. What's the difference there?
Yeah, and they're building on each other. So a smart wallet that we just talked about is able to read and interpret a set of rules. With roaming wallets, we're talking about wallets that go from framework to framework, essentially country to country. So I could have a wallet that is issued to me here in the UK under UK rules. It contains credentials that are to international standards. So my passport and my driving license, and there's already international standards there for MDLs and digital travel credentials emerging. I wouldn't say they're complete, but they're emerging. So if I come over to the US, what I would want is that my wallet will roam in the same way as my phone roams today, and the same way as my payments instruments work today. And my digital identity should be no different. I don't expect to have to get another wallet because I'm in the US. I expect the wallet I've already got to roam and to adapt to the US rules. So we've been doing a lot of work around with some core credentials, we call them golden credentials, of passport, driving license, bank account, information about my telco account, which is quite often used, and national ID cards where they exist. Now, they don't exist in the US or UK for us, but in most places around the world, they do exist. Those are the 5 golden credentials. If I've got those in my wallet and they are to international standards, when I move from place to place, they should still be recognized. So if in the US, I want to now formulate a NIST IAL2 under 863, if I've got a driving license and a bank account in my wallet that are to recognize international standards, that should be able to be done instantly. As I open my wallet in the US, it can formulate, oh, you've managed to get to an IAL2. If you want to get to an IAL3, you're going to have to do this. So that's what we mean by a roaming wallet. So the same rule description language, if then used on an international basis, will enable wallets to roam from place to place.
Yeah, I mean, this is the really interesting part to me. So now we're starting to get into, the real world. You're carrying these credentials, and it brings up 2 things in mind. So let me go to the first one first, which is around like readers. That's the way I'll put it. Because let's just say we're talking about a driver's license issued by my state, and say they did that next year. Now, if I wanted to use my driver's license at a store to buy alcohol, I need to be 21. it seems to me that I can't just show them like, hey, look, I've got my driver's license on my phone, you see, and I could potentially just screenshot it and change the date on it or something like that. It seems to me that they'd have to have some kind of reader that maybe did near field communication. The other scenario is I get pulled over by a police officer. I don't want to like unlock my phone and hand my unlocked phone to a police officer. Now he could go searching through and figure out whether or not he wants to arrest me based on things he finds in my phone. He doesn't like what I do. He doesn't like that I like the New York Yankees when he's a Boston Red Sox fan or something like that. So to me, it seems like there'd have to be some kind of electronic exchange of communication that would be like a reader type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. In face-to-face environments, we're going to need readers. So a lot of what we're doing with wallets will enable the wallet to be used online as well. So that's fine. At the relying party end, as we call it, there is an electronic read of the wallet, and all of that is done, over the web, and done securely. In face-to-face situations, as you've described, we're going to need readers for two reasons. One, both parties need to know that they can trust each other and that the information they're presenting is genuine. So, if we consider the example that the law enforcement officer wanting to see your driving license. The MDL standard is designed to be able to do that without winding your window down. So the officer should be able to say to you, I want to read your driving license, and put their reader to the window. You should be able to touch that reader on your side, and what it should say to you is, your device should say, yes, this is a genuine law enforcement officer. And I know that because the signature in their reader, I've checked back to a trust server somewhere, and it's on the list. So this is a genuine officer. And what they're asking for now is this information from your driving license. Do you consent to share it? Yes, I do. And then that information goes back to the officer. Part of that, though, is the other way around. Consider the officer. How does he know that's the person? So that's done today with the photograph that is on the device. What we're moving to in those kind of presentation is it is a photograph, but the device is doing the face of the person that is presenting it back to the stored photograph from the driving license in this issue. So it will only present the information if those two things have been done. So the officer really doesn't have to do the face match. The presenting user's device is doing that for them as part of the ecosystem. And in the UK, we're working on a alcohol based change to the law at the moment. There's a consultation out, and that will involve readers, and the readers will simply get back a statement of over 18 in our case. They don't get the picture back. That will all be done on the presenter's phone.
Yeah, I think that whole scenario is very interesting because I brought up like those edge use cases earlier, which you can't even come up with the whole list of edge use cases. But if you had a reader that you said, okay, I'm going to transmit some info, and it came back and said, do you want to share this information? You could accept or decline, or maybe uncheck certain things like that. Because, buying a card, maybe they want your address. I don't know, maybe they're doing a $50 off discount for organ donors because, the owner of that dealership really believes in that, but you don't have to share that information, or maybe you do want to. I don't know. I'm getting off topic a little bit there. The other thing that came to mind, though, in this whole area was that, you talked about all these different countries and that there's national IDs. And then in the United States, we've got 50 states that issue credentials. The other thing is I can see credentials being like universities issuing credentials. Like, that way it's like, you want to know that I have a degree from that university, I can transmit that, or that's in my wallet. There's so many different scenarios. So it seems to me that there's this transition period that needs to take place where you need some time where, you're going to need the physical in-hand credential, like a driver's license or a passport, while not only governments and organizations transition the timeline that they transition, but also not everybody in the world has a smartphone, right? So, if it's kind of relies on smartphone, there's going to have to be some transition period as well. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the first let's talk about the phone to start with. So for several years now, we've been talking about wallets being more of a virtual concept than a device-based physical wallet. So we want to see that, I can have a wallet, I can use it on my iPhone, on my Mac, I can use it, easily transfer it from one device to another. The device becomes an important key storage device and an important part of the security of the whole ecosystem, but it shouldn't be at the center of it. So we need to make sure that we're not bound to a single device. For those who haven't got devices, we need to then enable them to present digital information in a deviceless manner. We have one member who is doing a lot of work, two members actually now, around digitally or proofing someone and then issuing them with very sophisticated QR codes physically that they can use them to present digital information that's stored in the QR code, which is a good compromise for people who don't want to carry a digital device. They can carry a piece of plastic or even a piece of paper that enables them to do that. If you look at what they're doing in the Philippines with PhilSys, you could have your ID there again in a QR code, essentially printed cheaply on a piece of paper. And one of the things they've been doing is rolling out laminators to town halls so people can laminate these things so that they last longer. But they've got now their digitally presentable ID in a QR code. We need to plan this transition. Not everyone has or should be compelled to have a smartphone to make this work. But this is going to take time. I mentioned the 5 golden credentials earlier on. We're already seeing progress with digital travel credentials and mobile driving licenses. We're seeing both of those specifications saying they could also support national IDs. So they can be sold, therefore, in 2 different ways through a different standard. Telco accounts and bank accounts is an area we're going to be pushing for standards on. And we think that given that those ecosystems are highly standardized anyway because of the way payments and telcos roam, we think that should be relatively simple to do. Those 5 golden credentials I can see being covered in the next 5 years. But then things like standardization of university credentials, health credentials, proof of employment, that's going to take longer. And one of the things we're pushing on governments around the globe to do is to start thinking about that and put a program in place that moves their whole country to digital issuing. Because it's not going to happen without a plan. There are massive economic benefits to moving to digital issuance of these things. But in isolation, saying to the individual university, are you going to be the first to move to this? Unless it's a bit of an academic project, it's not going to happen. It needs some serious planning on a countrywide basis. So one of the things we're going to be highlighting in another paper we're doing, really aimed at the UK government, regular to our election, is highlighting that it needs to plan for that issuance of things digitally. Having the digital ID is great, but it needs to be able to collect these other digital credentials as well.
I find it interesting that you talk about the non-digital credential here, right? A QR code or something like that. I immediately start to think of sci-fi movies that I've seen, right? Where you have like a barcode or something that you scan on your wrist. It's set up when you're bored or whatever. And right, that points back to some sort of central repository. I don't think we're there yet, and certainly not advocating mandate of having a tattoo put on you. But this idea of a QR code that's plastic, right, or you carry around for people who don't have a digital device, I find pretty interesting. Do you find that is that a real thing, or is that more just kind of conjecture right now and kind of thinking about, we do need to solve for people who don't have a appropriately advanced enough technology device to support a wallet in this case?
Oh, it's absolutely real. I mentioned the example of the Philippines. With PhilSys, it's one of the options and one of the most popular options there. I'm trying to remember the stats from when I met with them back in November. It's about 50-50 issue between having a device-based version and having the QR code version, I think. So, a lot of people in there, which is very much an emerging nation, don't have smartphones. So they're going to need that capability. And the middle ground here is feature phones. So, feature phones are getting smarter. They're not getting as far as smartphones, but their ability to carry a credential and present a QR code for many of them is already there. So you get to this point where you say, well, but I just don't want to be digital. That's fine. You still need a way to do all of this manually if you wish. We're not saying, and we're not advocating that everybody must move to digital means, but within the digital domain, we need to cater for different options and not assume everybody couldn't get to a full-featured smartphone.
How do biometrics play into this when we're talking about a mix of, digital methods, and what if I am a non-digital method, or is biometric purely for digital authentication? Or is there, the example you mentioned in the Philippines, you literally are the person holding your card, right? How do you prove that in a digital world?
Yeah. In that area, that card has as high resolution as possible image of you in the QR code that is then revealed to a reader, and that's cross-checked. So that biometric comparison then becomes a manual comparison to the person you're presenting it to, or if it's a machine, it needs to capture the picture and it needs to capture the other credential. So if you think about what I said earlier about moving away from devices, this is where biometrics are key, because actually, if this whole thing around my identity is triggered from my biometric and is held in the cloud, and all of that's secure, I don't need a device in play. It can all be done with the device of the person who's reading it, because if I can present my biometric to that, and then within that interaction use their device to consent to share my information with them, I don't need a device to do that. Now, we're way off that, and we need a lot more trust in biometrics before we can do that. With biometrics, there's been quite a lot around the fact that they've had some challenges dealing with different ethnicities, which I think now has really gone back to, well, if you train them, the AIs correctly, they don't have a problem with different ethnicities. You just need to make sure you've got a proper training sample that's available to avoid that problem. But because of issues around biometrics, and particularly fears about how good deepfakes are getting and how they can fool biometrics, some of the frameworks we're working with are starting to put rules in saying that biometrics must not be the only option. So you can't go into a situation where you have to have a biometric. You must have other choices around knowledge and possession authenticators in order to prove who you are. And in proofing as well, you can't use biometrics as the only option. The UK is just putting a policy change through at the moment that says when you're proofing someone into a digital ID as a proofing identity service provider, you can't offer biometrics as your only option. You've got to have alternatives. We think that's important. We don't think individual companies should be compelled to offer alternatives. The consumers of identity, the relying parties, should make sure they are adopting alternatives, is our view there. They must be available in the market.
So we made it 53 minutes before the mention of deepfakes and AI, which I think is a record for us, at least recently on this show. It's certainly something that we've got to all account for, right? Is I can immediately think of like that picture, right? If I have a QR code and it's an image of me, what happens if that image of me changes? Or what if someone alters it in some way to be someone else? I want to give us a pat on the back for going 53 minutes to talk about AI in any substantive force. But it's definitely interesting to hear that's already part of the discussion. If I'm in this space and I care, how do I follow along with what's happening? Is this something where I go to the openidentityexchange.org website? Are there other resources that I should be looking at? Like, how do I keep up with this stuff?
It's hard. On our website, we publish our own papers, which about once a quarter. We publish some of the consultation responses. We push back to governments as well openly so people can see what we're saying. So our website is a good source of that. For members, we do a weekly or bi-weekly update on market news and views, what's going on. We have a lot more resources for members as well in terms of what they can see online to find out what's going on in the identity industry. So, it would be great for your listeners to become members if they want to find out more. And, but there's so much going on in this space at the moment. It's really fascinating for us to be at the heart of this and be influencing its direction. It's a challenge, but we're absolutely loving the work.
Well, I'm glad there's somebody thinking about this, and there's smarter people than me trying to work through that. there's only so much we can cover in like an hour, right, for a podcast. I would definitely encourage people, and we'll have a link in our show notes for people to check out the website so they can kind of get more information on that and hopefully get involved. I think more people involved is always a better thing, right? More viewpoints and more points of data, right, to accumulate things. I do want to close the conversation on a different type of identity. One of the things that was discussed prior to you coming to the show was the fact that you do theater work and that you perform and things like that. So you're already assuming an alter identity. So let's keep in that same vein. If you could perform in any theater show, any character, whatever it may be, which one would it be and why?
So I've performed in many shows over the years. I've done Shakespeare. I do what in Britain we call pantomime. So I was dressed as a panto dame a few weeks ago, which is essentially a kind of bad drag act that we do as a part of the comedy, as part of that genre in the UK. What I would love to do is to play the part of Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Show. That would be my ultimate dream. I'm probably getting a little old now, so somebody needs to offer me that part pretty soon. But I'm available if anyone's interested.
All right. So if I want to hire you, right, I think we could probably get you involved with like acting. Jim, what about you? If you could play the role of any, I don't know how much theater you watch, or we can expand if we need to.
No, so history-based dramas are kind of like one of my favorites. So I'd like to just be a double, or not a double, like somebody who doesn't really have a part or that you don't notice. But if it was you, like, here's the part. I walk in the door and I walk across the room, and like therefore, like you would be etched in history as like part of that movie.
Wait, so you want to be an extra that's the role?
I want to be an extra. Yeah, that was the word I was searching for. Thank you. I want to be an extra in a movie that's like timeless, that people will watch forever.
And like, oh, there goes that guy.
Even though people don't notice me, they consciously notice me, they'll notice me.
Okay. That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I feel like, Jim, dream bigger, man. Don't you want to be like...
I don't see myself being an actor.
Okay.
So but I think I could be an extra.
Okay. All right. I mean, I play the role of Jeff, podcast host, at least once a week. So that normal functioning human, relatively speaking, I feel like that's the role that I'm designed for. I haven't done any acting at all other than like school plays. So I was in a Christmas play. Must have been like 5th grade. So it's probably like 10 or 11 or something like that. And it was the 12 Days of Christmas. And there was a solo. So everyone was singing, and I was 5 bales of hay. And so I had to sneeze. And that was like my big thing, was like, I had the best sneeze. So I did 5 bales of hay as like a 10-year-old. And that is the peak of my performance on a stage anywhere. So Nick, you've got me like beat by like 10,000%, if then, and then some.
So you did 5 bales of hay, and you're telling me to dream bigger?
What's that?
You're telling me to dream bigger?
Hey, that was 5th grade, man. At least I was, I had a solo part of it because the whole sneeze and stuff like that. Like, come on, man, you wear the jackets, you go to these conferences, you could be a leading person.
Maybe. Jim, I have a friend who, he's part of the there's like a quasi Hollywood scene in Atlanta. So they're doing a lot of production of TV shows and movies in Georgia now. Anyway, he has busted his ass to kind of rise up. And I will say he got like not a speaking role in the movie Black Adam. And there's a scene where he takes his sword or something and like busts over the head of Dwayne Johnson, and then it like bends, it shapes to Dwayne Johnson's head, and then he gets punched by Dwayne Johnson and like flies off the screen. Like, and but the thing is, like, people see him at the gym and they're like, hey, were you in that movie Black Adam? He's got like that small scene. So I'd be good with that. I know how much work he's put into it to get roles like that. you put a lot of work into it. I'm just not willing to put that much time into it personally.
Well, let's go
I
to the
think
expert
it could
here.
be an extra.
We've got an expert on the show, Nick. If you had to cast Jim in something, what do you think Jim would like? What's a role that of the hour that we've been talking here that you think Jim would be a good fit for? And myself too, if you feel like it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think if we were going to do like a sequel to, say, Wayne's World, we could get you two in it.
There you go.
That'd be a good place for both of you there.
I could do that. I'm a fan of Wayne's World.
Wayne's World.
I would definitely be Garth.
Part-time.
That's for sure. Fell on my keys. Ow. All right. Terrible Garth impression. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up there for this week. I don't think we can top that. So thanks, Nick, for saving us there in that last minute. We'll go ahead and leave it. We'll have links in our show notes for people to connect with Nick on LinkedIn. Check out Open Identity Exchange. That's openidentityexchange.org. Follow all the great work that's there. Help keep us connected and moving together and interoperability. So thanks, Nick, for being on top of that. You can visit us on the web, idacpodcast.com, on Twitter at idacpodcast, or whatever Twitter is called by the time you listen to this, whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, if it still exists. We have a YouTube channel. Jim is very proud of making sure that we get people over there. So we've started to post like shorts, and all of our episodes are up there as well. So another way to check us out. We're on Mastodon at IDAC Podcast at infosec.exchange. And of course, you can always connect with Jim and I on LinkedIn. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk with everyone in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com and find us on Twitter at IDAC Podcast. See you next time on Identity at the Center.